It's an unusual program in that, well, 4 or 5 people had a say in it, and I think it's a very strong and interesting program. The 2 Cherubini pieces that we've selected are the overture to his opera Medei and the aria, which will be being sung by Stephanie Doustrac. She actually chose the Cherubini aria that we're doing, and we had quite a lot of toing and froing about which piece of Berlioz we would do. She said that she would do Berlioz, but it would need to be La Mort de Cléopâtre, which I'm very pleased has ended up in the programme, because it's a stunning work, a sort of 18-20 minute Scena for mezzo-soprano and orchestra. As well as those works, we also felt that something more familiar for the audiences would be a good idea, so we included Mozart's Paris Symphony, which doesn't have so much of a link with Cherubini and Mehul, except that he wrote it when he was in Paris, and so it does have that link with those French composers. And I was very pleased that in discussing all of these ideas with Enrique Mazzola, he was very pleased to take up the ideas and to run with them. And he actually, I think it was him who actually suggested the Mozart Paris Symphony, because he too wanted to conduct a repertoire piece that the orchestra knows well. I hope you enjoy the programme. I'm certainly looking forward to it. The Mehul Symphony, which I haven't actually mentioned, is a gem, and the highlight of that for me is the slow movement that incorporates an excellent tutti cello solo passage in which our cellos will shine. So do come along, and I hope you enjoy it.
I'm really looking forward to this project coming up, partly because there's so much about it that I don't know. I mean, there's some stuff I do know, like the Berlioz Mort de Cléopâtre, which we've done before, and which is just fantastic to play on the bass. Berlioz is one of those composers that really knows how to write for the bass as an individual instrument. So you feel like you can really succeed with what he gives you, whereas there are some composers you feel like you're always struggling and that maybe you're a failed cello or something like that. But with Berlioz and Brahms, you just know that it's going to work. And we've got this most amazing bit towards the end where we're the heartbeat and just sort of staggering after the poison. And that is just fantastic. And of course, the Mozart we've done before, that's all very familiar music. But Mehul, I've only done a tiny bit of in my time. And Cherubini, I think I've done even less. So I'm really looking forward to finding out more about them and to see if we get a sense of, I don't know, national traits between that and the Berlioz, or if we build up a sort of impression of what was going on musically around that time.
I'm very excited in the sense that it's a programme based around a city and what was going on at a particular time, and the very beginning of the 19th century in Paris was a blossoming of the Paris Conservatoire. The string technique was being taken on and brought forward, and the sound of an orchestra was being developed, and all sorts of colours. And Berlioz is incredibly individual in what he does. And just as Cecilia said, I know nothing about Mehul, so we're going to be discovering what's going on in other composers who were lesser known, but were clearly Parisian and very up and coming at the time. And obviously Mozart, as a young man, was incredibly sensitive to national characteristics, what audiences liked. So his Paris Symphony was written for with Parisians in mind.
Because in my mind, you have Berlioz and sort of French school in a world here, and Mozart is definitely in a different world. And it's going to be really interesting when we actually put them all together in the concert to see whether I'm justified in that, or whether to see
what the intersection is.
Yeah, to see how much they cross-fertilise.
It's very interesting actually for us, because one of the fascinating things about this programme is that probably we know about as much about the music, well, I know about as much about the music of Mehul and Cherubini as most of you do. It's always wonderful as a performer to come upon a whole load of new music that you don't really know what it's going to sound like. It's a bit like discovering a new flavour. I mean, you might know what carrots are like, and you might not know what beans taste like. But the first time you ever come across asparagus, it's a very different sort of thing, and it's just like a wonderful discovery. So when I play Cherubini, I know that Cherubini was a famous composer, and I know that Beethoven thought he was terrific, but I don't know what Cherubini really sounds like. If I heard some Cherubini, I might say, well, perhaps is that Mozart? It's a bit more complicated than Mozart. Is it perhaps Haydn? Perhaps it's like Beethoven. And I don't really know, because I don't have an experience of listening to Cherubini. And Mehul even less. I mean, I know that he was a classical composer going on romantic. I mean, Berlioz admired him, and he was, I believe, one of the first composers ever to be described as a romantic composer. So, if not the first. So I'm really looking forward to playing it. I've got my part, I've had a look at what my part sounds like, well, I've had to listen to what my part sounds like, but what it's going to sound like when we all get together, I really have no idea. So it's as much a discovery for me as it is for any of you.
Most people at the time thought of Mehul as a pre-romantic, someone coming into, like Beethoven, we might regard as a pre-romantic. That was the sort of background, that feeling they had about Mehul, that he was someone who had romantic inclinations in the music, which are definitely there, and you can hear them in the Fourth Symphony, particularly the slow movement, the second movement with the cello solo, and wonderful harmonies after the cello solo finishes. And they thought then that, you know, had he survived or lived longer, maybe he would have developed in that direction more. Died in 1817. Berlioz was only 14 when he died. So he remains a kind of legend. And his symphonic legacy was not known, because these third and fourth were not known. Had they been known, the history of music might have been a bit different. And the reason for that is the Fourth Symphony, the one we're going to hear, has a cyclic structure. It's very, very tightly thematically controlled. So it takes Haydn and Mozart, their great intensity of thematic working, and it puts them to a new use. And we think of the 19th century as the great age of the cyclic symphony. You'd have a theme in the first movement, as in Bruckner's Fifth, and it comes back in the last movement. How many times does that happen with Liszt, for example? One theme comes and unites the thing and has different aspect. Mehul already did this in the symphony we're going to hear. That's the really amazing thing. In the slow introduction to the first movement, you have the first thing you hear is a pattern of 4 notes, and that pattern of 4 notes in different ways comes all through the work and comes back in original form in the fast finale as the second subject, as a secondary idea. And you can imagine, when I was writing this work out at home from the parts, I'll never forget the feeling, because what happened was, this thing was taking shape under my pen. There was no score, there was just the parts. And so what was happening was that this thing was coming into focus bar by bar, part by part, and suddenly, you can imagine, I nearly hit the roof when I saw the theme of the first movement introduction coming back in the finale. Because I realised then that this is a prototype structure of immense importance that has remained unknown.